Hey gang! So today I wanted to talk about the importance of pre-production. Now when it comes to recording an album to put out, there's so many different genres and so many different ways of working nowadays that it's really tough to kind of wrap pre-production into a simple little shell. So today I just want to focus on 3 areas of album pre-production you should have as sorted out as possible before you actually go in to start recording an album. And those 3 things are going to be arrangements and the parts played, the order you're going to put those tracks out on an album, and then lastly, the core sound of the album itself. So with that said, let's get right into it. So the arrangement of a song and what instrument should be playing what and when really go hand in hand together. Now the arrangement end of it's pretty straightforward. Is a given song just going to be verse, chorus, and done? Does a song need a bridge? Or maybe the second verse should be half as long as the first verse? So you definitely want to get the arrangement of each song sorted out before you go and record an album. Now when it comes to what should be playing what and when, that's actually a little bit easier when you're in a band situation. You know, when you're in a band and you're jamming songs out in real time with each other, trying to figure out who should be playing what and when comes together a lot easier. At least I find anyway. I mean, how many times have you been jamming out a new song with your band and suddenly the drummer does a fill a little differently or the bassist does something different or whatever, and then suddenly the whole band stops and they're like, whoa, wait a second, what was that? So as an example, again, just say the drummer does a fill a little bit differently. Well, now the guitarist might play the part during that fill slightly different to match the fill. The bassist might change his bass line just slightly to go along with the fill. Or another example, say the second verse of a song. Should the whole band be playing for that second verse? Or maybe it should just be drums, bass, and vocals. And then maybe the guitar comes in halfway through the second verse. Now and again, in a band situation, things like that just kind of happen naturally as the band's working through a song. But when you're doing it yourself though, there's a lot of trial and error, there's a lot of experimenting. So you're left to figure out a lot of that on your own. You want the different instruments and parts to lock in together and work together. Like, when do you want to have a call and answer between 2 different instruments? Is there a word in a vocal line where maybe a cymbal hit would be a good accent for that particular word? Now, there's a billion different ways you could look at that, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm sure you guys get the point. But how each instrument in the song works together and plays off of each other is definitely something you want to have as sorted as possible before you go into the studio to actually record the songs. And that's going to bring us into your album's track order. Alright, so some of you may be thinking, well, who cares about the track order? I can sort that out further down the road. And I'll explain to you why I think track order should be placed in the pre-production stage of recording. Now, just like an individual song, an album itself is going to have a flow. So what I do, for instance, is let's say I'm going to have 6 tracks on an EP. I'll bounce out the 6 versions of those rough songs and I'll put them into a playlist in iTunes. And then I'll start rearranging the order of each of those songs to sort out how this album should flow together. Now, why this is important to pre-production is this. Not only am I trying to figure out how the album should flow as a whole, I'm also looking for areas where maybe this song should crossfade into this song. Or if we were to look at a couple of crazy examples of this, listen to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon or Linkin Park's A Thousand Suns. On both those albums, the way each song flows into the next isn't a fluke, it wasn't an accident, it would have been very much planned out in the early stages of making those albums. So even if you're not trying to make a theme album, this is still important to know. If you're going to have 2 songs that fade into each other, or crossfade into each other on an album, you're going to want to know this ahead of time before you start to record those songs. Because knowing that in advance is going to let you know how this song needs to fade out, or how long it needs to fade out, or how this next song should be starting. Or depending on how this song is flowing into the next song, it might make more sense to actually record both those songs in the same session, depending on how intricate this fade in between the 2 of them is. And like I said, Dark Side and A Thousand Suns aren't flukes. The way each song integrates into the next song would have been pre-planned out, and that would completely dictate how these songs were recorded. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is the core sound of your album. Alright, so what am I talking about when I'm talking about a core sound? Well, every album has a core sound. You compare a Zeppelin record to a Metallica record to a Chemical Brothers record. They all sound completely different. So let me explain it this way. I've got 10 songs on the go right now, and this is how I approach things. So I take one of those songs, and I start with the drum sound. For me, drums are the foundation, so I always start here. Now, do I want this album to have tight, hard-hitting, punchy drums? Or do I want them to have big, gigantic, huge-sounding drums like on a Zeppelin record? Now at this stage of the game, I have to program drums, just is what it is. But I decide on what I want the drums to sound like. I open up Steven Slate drums and I blank it out. Then I go through the individual drums and I pick out my kick sound, I pick out my snare sound, I pick out the toms, I pick out the cymbals, and I build a kit from scratch. After I've got that squared away as I can get it, then I move on to the guitars. I sort out what the guitars on the left should sound like, and then what the guitars on the right should sound like. And then what I'm going for here is to try to find complementing guitar sounds that work together and also work with the drum kit I've sorted out. And then I do the same thing with a bass guitar. Again, trying to find a bass sound that works with the guitars I've already sorted out and the drums I've sorted out. Now for me, what I'm working on, right there, those 3 instruments, that's my core sound. Now, once I've got that all sorted out on the first song, I can take all those settings from slate drums, or if I'm using an amp sim, and I can copy that to all of the other songs. Oh, and a random side note, if you hear clacking around, that's just my dog walking around upstairs. So where was I? Right, so I'll take that core drum sound, those core guitar amp sounds, the bass amp sound, and I'll copy that to every track I'm going to be doing. Now, that doesn't mean those settings are going to stay the exact same for every song. You still need to look at each song individually. This song or part might need more or less distortion on the guitars. That crunchy bass sound might work great for most songs, but now you've got a song with a slower verse or a slower song. Well, suddenly you need a different bass amp sound. Or for instance, I'll tune the kick drum depending on the song and the tuning that it's in. But figuring out those core sounds right from the get-go make it a lot easier to record the rest of the tracks. Again, they might not be 100% bang on for each song, but it puts you in the ballpark for each song. Because you don't need to reinvent the wheel for every song on an album. Just because you're putting out an album with 12 songs doesn't mean you have to have 50 different guitar amps and 37 different drum kits. You just sort out the core sound right from the get-go, and from there just tweak what needs to be tweaked from song to song. So depending on the kind of music that you write and how you put your music together, some of what I've talked about today might be more applicable to you than other things I've mentioned, but hopefully there's at least something that any of you watching can take from this video and roll with. And the key takeaway for anybody should be that the more you can put up front into pre-production, the easier you're going to have it when it comes time to start recording the actual album. And on that note, that's all I've got for you guys this week. Just want to thank everyone for watching and take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.